So, well, first I want to introduce Veasna Noun. He is the Cambodia country manager of Union Aid Broad, AFIDA. This is a non-governmental organization that's based in Australia, and they help workers in around many continents, in many countries. He's going to talk today with us about the importance of consultation with trade unions in the human rights due diligence process. So I'm going to start with my first question, and then we are going to open for more participations. Okay, so my first question, Veasna. Oh, thank you, by the way, for your time and for your wonderful video lecture. My first question is, what could be some of the main barrier to achieve the win-win approach, no, that you talk about in your video lecture for trade unions, brand and supplier? What are the main barriers that those parties can achieve that win-win approach?
Yes, thanks, Louise, and welcome everyone who have come to the workshop. You hear me okay? Yeah. Yeah. So I get to some of the key barriers to have this win-win approach. You know, I think a couple of key issue or key problems. I think one would be, I think the nature of the global supply chain itself. I think it's the different layers, the fact that the global brands are away from the workplaces. In some cases, the factories owner themselves. You know, some of them are using intermediaries channels. You know, Asia in particular, they really have the intermediary layers where they use people in Hong Kong, for example, to deal with the orders, deal with the productions made in Cambodia and Bangladesh. I think this kind of distance is also an issue. The lack of direct contact, the lack relationship. You know, the supplier are sandwiched in the middle of the two parties is also an issue, and an issue of, I think, a kind of genuine commitment from global brands and to engage with worker organization, with suppliers. This is also an issue, you know.
Yes, please, Philip.
Okay. We talked about this maybe last week about this trade relationship that Africa is having with I don't know whether specifically America. Okay, it's called AGOA, Africa Growth Opportunity Act, and then what it says, it implies that, okay, African businesses or industry are given opportunity to sell their produce or goods with very little tax or without being taxed. And then, okay, last time when we gave an example, America imposing that South Africa must buy chickens, and then which impact on South African workers. And then there's more to that. Apparently, it's not, I mean, like, sure, the professor mentioned other stuff as well, that they're imposing on African countries market, which impact on the workers or the factories, the businesses there. Okay, now about the apparel textile industries. I think there are about 250, if I'm not mistaken, are spread in African countries, which are mainly which the clothes that they're making, it's mainly to for American market. And then I'm not even sure if these companies, obviously these companies are not from South Africa, I guess. They could be from China. We have here in South Africa as well, in Durban, where exploitation of workers is very serious, the sweatshops and so on. Okay, okay, there's this particular example in Lesotho, which is a country which is controlled by South Africa economically, and then they've got a river which is turned into a big dam, and then the water is supplying South Africa and then not supplying the people in Lesotho. So, okay, these factories which are making clothes, first I have read, to start with, women there, if you are a woman, you also have to give sex favors to the managers and things like that. And then second, it has been found that these factories are polluting water, river water. And then the first people affected by this polluted river water is the people in Lesotho. And then again, now it's South Africa as well, because this water is coming into South Africa. So I would like, in the case of Africa and South Africa, I would like to know about this Ogawa thing, to Veasna, about, you know, and then how they with these due diligence and then the text and so on, because I mean, seemingly it's poor of the poorest who are affected, like with informal working and all. I mean, you know, all of it. Sure.
Okay, thank you so much, Philip. Thank you for those for that question. Veasna is now with us. Veasna, we were talking about some question that I going to ask you after you answer the first one that I did. So please, Veasna, you can go ahead with your answer for the first question.
Oh, so you hear me now, yeah?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah. Okay. So sorry, I lost some of the conversation that you have. So yeah, so I can continue a little bit. So I think the other barrier, I think, is the bad industry relation that that have always often had in the garment and apparel sectors. You know, it's really trade unions and employers side who have often have engaged into the fights. You know, so it's really the people with the conflicting interests and have had like a long history of you know, like the disputes. Many of them engage in the different continuous dispute that they have had as well. So I think this kind of the barrier into it, because it has to be a genuine interest to negotiate, to address the problem, but also working in partnership, you know, like coming to the bargaining table with a commitment. And then I think certainly a kind of you know, situation in the countries, you know, like whether workplace bargaining is suitable. You know, very often in producing country, you have like you know, national wage negotiation, but you also have like a workplace negotiation as well. So the two, like a layer or two of bargaining has to, you know, either complement or coordinate one another. I think these are like, I see as a challenge to this. Yeah.
Thank you, Veasna. We were talking about some additional questions. I'm going to go with the first one that Benji mentioned. One of the interesting facts that you mentioned was the a high union density rate in the garment sector. No, that's 70%. That is very a little bit shocking for us because it's not too common in our country sometimes to see this kind of rate now of people that is unionized. So there are two questions around that high density. No, the first one is how that was possible. No, how was that possible to lead that high union density, and the second is related to how the workers can achieve with that high union density in order to enforce the compliance mechanism with the human rights due diligence. No, so around this high density, there are these two questions. I don't know if you can share your opinion about that, Veasna.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Again, you hear me okay? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Well, of course, this 70% union density is the highest in the region in Asia, actually. So it's high in the region. It has a history of, it was, I think, the bilateral trade agreement 15 years ago. I think it kind of helped a lot to the industry having this compliance. This, it's almost like beginning of the free labor market in Cambodia, and it was a lot of interest for like a first democracy in the country as well. So people also wanted to like a first experience in democracy and democracy at workplace. So it's also like appealing to worker as well, I think, to join trade union. So I think it's a combination of the feeling worker have at the shop floor to join unions, but also at the country level, like the country have to show the compliance, and therefore brands were also encouraged, especially from the American brands, also encouraged to support the trade unions, assistance of the trade union support. Even, it was good at that time, because then the companies could get the free quota of export. So I think that kind of the reason for having this high union density. And then the second question on how the union density can help improve the second part, isn't it?
Yes.
I lost again.
Yes, the second part is how this high density can be used or can be useful for enforce the mechanism of the human rights due diligence, no? Also to help in the design, no, but also in the enforcement.
Yeah, I think it's only. This is a challenge. This is still a challenge. Even we have high unionization, but I think we still have. So it seems that the free, because when we have a union, we expect to have it can improve the working conditions, and creating a lot of force where employers and brands can work with the union organizations, and then it will result into improvement of working conditions and rights and so on. But it's not that easy. It's not that easy. I think even we have high unionization rate, but we have very few collective bargaining agreement, for example. So I think this also prove it. Because it has to result in, and if they allow freedom of association, but then they have to engage into collective bargaining as well, like negotiation at the factory level, and also brands need to coordinate with the employers. For example, when wage is raised, and then their price of the order have to be raised accordingly as well, which is not yet the case So it need to use of this high unionization to put pressure on the employers and the brand in particular, to improve the situation. And very often supplier would depend on brands to who determine the relationship between the suppliers and brands on the ground, and the worker organizations, trade unions on the ground.
Thank you. That is very important, no? Because the freedom of association is like the union of three parts. No, it's unionization, but also collective bargaining process and the strike. Those are the three very important elements. So if we just have the first one and not the other one, is unuseful. No? So thank you for that answer. And Philip then mentioned as you may know, there is this African Growth and Opportunity Act. This is the U.S. Congress passed that in 2000. It's an agreement with Africa to try to have small taxes for importing products from Africa. And the question that Philip raised was a little is what could be the adverse impact of that AGOA, of that act, in terms of maybe pollution, or maybe because this could be a good opportunity for workers, but at the same time could be a field when there is a sexual harassment cases. What is, according to your opinion, the impact of this AGOA agreement between the U.S. and some countries in Africa for the workers? What is the real impact? Can you hear us, Veasna?
It's shopping. It's choppy. So can you raise it again?
Yes. The question is basically about this African Growth and Opportunity Act, the AGOA, between this U.S. law that allowed less taxes for products from Africa. So the question is, what is the real impact of this AGOA program for workers in Africa? Because Philip mentioned that maybe that could be a context in which there are some pollution of rivers, could be also places for sexual harassment against female workers. So we would like to know your opinion about this AGOA impact in workers in Africa.
Sorry, I could not get it clearly.
It's basically the impact of AGOA in workers in Africa. What is your impression about the AGOA, the U.S. law that allows products from Africa to the U.S. market?
Yeah. So you hear me okay now? Yeah. Oh no.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure about the situation in Africa, but I think it's in Asia and almost producing country. I think there's two sort of agreement, like a kind of either bilateral trade agreement, or multilateral trade agreement, like the everything but not arm of the EU, because America and the EU is like a major market of either textile or garment apparel, or now is even other products. So the importing countries in Europe, then they use this preferential market access. So for poor country, they can get the import the products without paying tax, but then they have to prove compliance, like human rights and labor rights compliance. And that is the kind of multilateral trade incentive or agreement. And then in some country they have like bilateral trade agreement, so individual country either in England or in America, they have a bilateral agreement with countries like the EU is having a kind of agreement with Vietnam now, so they can import garment and apparel products to EU without paying tax. So they get market like a incentive, and it's competitive advantage to other producing country. But then they have to show compliance, so they have to. I think one of the conditions of the EU give is to get the country, get Vietnam to ratify the ILO convention and allow for freedom of trade union in the country. So yeah, so this is what I think this is what I have learned, and this have either both the bilateral trade agreement and multilateral trade agreement, like the everything but not armed. This really help to the for worker on the ground, union on the ground, to deal with employers and the brands as well, because then they have economic interests from this mechanism or this arrangement, which I think what Philip was saying, there is such initiative as well. Yeah, I want to learn from, because I lost the connection earlier.
No, thank you for that comment, because it's important how you frame this AGOA, since you mentioned the bilateral agreements, the multilateral agreement. In this AGOA is more like unilateral law from the U.S. Congress, to promote commerce with some countries in Africa, no? So this AGOA has in that regard a different nature, no? With those that you described, no? But it's interesting for me, at least personally. It looks more like this generalized system of preference that we have in the past, no? A little bit like that. But it's important how what it could be the real impact that kind of unilateral preference can have in the workers, no? In the real life. Thank you for that comment, Veasna. And I don't know if anyone has another question or comment. I think Philip.
Okay. Sure. On the videos, okay. They talk about the brands and the retailers that they should contribute in holding. They should be responsible in ensuring that due diligence mandatory applies in the industries. Okay. So what about the informal markets or informal retailers? I mean, you have especially textile sold on the street, and then obviously the people who are selling those textile on the street, they are very poor. They don't have factories to make those clothes. Obviously, those clothes are coming from the factories, are made by the workers. So, and then also from the fact that those people who are in the informal economy, they are the poorest of the poorest. They are as well affected by this neo-colonial liberalisms, free market we've been talking about. So how can those people who are in the free in the informal market can also be responsible, making sure that the workers who produce these goods are
protected and so on? Thanks, Philip. Veasna, can you answer, please?
Yes. Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, this is a big issue. Yeah, the informal part. I mean, very often this industry have the kind of coexistence between the formal and informal workforce. Yeah, like people involved there. And it's also the case for Cambodia. I think it's also the case for in some other producing country in Asia as well. This is the case. And I think organizing, like a worker organizing, is important. I think at least trade union in Cambodia, I think this is their current effort now. Is really try to organize worker in the informal sectors. Basically, you know, it's much more difficult than the formal, you know, where you can have more like a clear employer. So it's like organizing in subcontractors, you know, like this is like a main issue in Cambodia now. And then because when you organize them, when you get them into trade unions, employers, we can identify the employer, we can identify the company where they are producing for, and therefore their working conditions can be negotiated, you know, can be negotiated with their suppliers by also getting their brands to be responsible. Because this is the whole idea of creating this informality in the industry is for compliance issue, because it's cheaper to produce this material in these substandard conditions, and having this substandard by creating like unidentifiable employers and brands. So it's a key strategy in a country like Cambodia. I think I also heard in Myanmar and in Bangladesh before the country in turmoil. I mean, and they also have this problem, like trying to organize worker in the informal economy. So to me, organizing is the response challenge.
Thank you, Veasna, for that answer. I'm going to make my second question. Is more about if you know about some good practices or good experiences with a brand trying to push to the suppliers, no, to respect the freedom of association. No? So the question is, how can brands can use their purchasing practices to motivate their suppliers to respect freedom of association, of collective bargaining? No? And if you are aware about any example where brands have do that, no?
Yes. Okay. So I mean, let's qualify the purchasing practices, and but mainly like using, you know, brands place an order to the suppliers, you know, to factories, and by, you know, and the order come into different form, you know, like in terms of, one is the key is the price, you know, like how much they pay for per unit labor cost. And then the other thing is about the nature of the order, you know, like how long does it get it? Is it a long-term order, you know? So I'm just saying that the purchasing practices, like there are several, you know, one is price, two is other conditions of the order, which are also important. Sometimes it's not the price, but they have like a favorable order, like condition to some of the suppliers. So yes, certainly this is important, because this is the right way where brands can use their order, the nature of order, price, or other condition of the order to encourage the suppliers, to encourage the company to to work with trade unions basically, and to negotiate the conditions right there. So this is a very important tool where brands can engage themselves, and then like first of all, the CBA negotiation on the ground or at the factory. Practically, brands have a lot of influence into this. In some brand even make it as a condition. I mean, some few leading brand make it as a condition to their supplier to have a negotiation for CBA on the ground. So they certainly can use this, can use their order to determine or the condition or even industrial relationship between the suppliers and the unions as well. And there are some leading some leading brands that they have done it. At least they showcase. I mean, in Cambodia they have, we have H&M, for example. We have Inditex, I think, and then also some of them have like a international framework agreement. The IFA. And then even the international framework agreement is more on freedom of association, trying to make sure that unions can really work in those factories and can negotiate, but it does not necessarily like you need to improve like increase wage or improve some of the conditions by using the price of the order. So I think, like, for example, very few brands would commit to the international framework agreement, which are kind of putting themselves in the middle of at the center of the negotiation on at the factory, for example. But there are few. I mentioned H&M because I think it's like Asia. They are like a major brand, and this is like a type of brand which produce and they are part of the international framework agreement with industry, or like a global union in the sectors which has it. And I think some of them are also involved, especially European brands. I think they are part of action, transformation, and collaboration. Even we don't see a clear case of using purchasing power, purchasing practices, in this one for that. I mean, even very few isolated, but the commitment under ACT is really for all the 21 brands to as a condition, their order price have to factor in, or how you call it, it have to be linked with the increased wages and working condition on at the factory level. So yes, there are few examples, but very few. And then I think we are at the beginning of this, like a kind of, this is what like a kind of new innovative way of making use, trying to engage brands with to improve the working condition, wages and working condition on the ground. There's a lot of challenges. There's some starting points, like a kind of in this consortium of brands, for example. I think it creates a big potential to engage with brands and to really make brand accountable, but they have to be, just solidarities, like, different countries have to campaign for delivery of the commitment and the ACT, this kind of agreement between the global unions and a group of brands and national unions. Yes, and of course, as Luz have mentioned, we also have to look into what are the leading brands, you know, with, among them as well, because I think there's also competition among the brands. So we really have to target some of the key brands where trade union can really engage them and, you know, negotiate. Very common in Asia where national trade union, you know, have like a kind of two-way communication, you know, on the one hand with the employers, you know, at the bargaining table, or at the same time, they also have a relationship or even bargaining with the supplier, with the brand as well, you know, so that brand can put right pressure using the same the right order or the incentive to you know, to achieve what the worker and the supplier on the ground would go for.
Thank you, and this is very important. No? The international solidarity among workers, no, from the north and the south can push brands and another corporation to try to have this human rights approach, or try to integrate union in this debate. No, in Peru we had a good example in 2013. 47 brands asked to the government to repeal a law that allow garment companies to hire workers for a short-term contract, no, for 3 months, 4 months. They can work for 15 years for the same company, but they have 3-month contracts, no? And it was interesting because were 47 brands that were very well known, and thanks to the work of the international federation, no, the industrial, that was possible, no? And that was a good also moment to talk about labor rights in the country, no? So, well, this is one example of how important is internationalism, no? It's international solidarity in general. Thank you for that answer. I don't know if anybody can have another question or comment. Please raise your hand. Yes. Go ahead, Philip.
Okay, I'm back to formal, informal retailers. Here in South Africa, there's this situation. You have clothes or textile made from, let's say, from China, Cambodia, Vietnam, and then you find them in the brand name retail store, and then those are protected. But if you find them on the street or in the informal shop, especially on the street, they are not protected. And then you find the police together with the trade union, they are against the informal trade of textile coming from elsewhere, because they are taking away jobs. And then as a result, the police confiscate these goods, and then lots, like containers of goods. So, and then at the end of the day, it's the workers who are producing in China or Cambodia or what. And then at the end of the day, it's the price, the workers who are going to pay that price. So how are the workers protected? Because if they are in business, if the businessmen lose money, they start to pay workers less or whatever. So how are the workers protected in, the plans to protect workers like that?
Veasna, can you answer, please? Can you hear us, Veasna?
Yeah. I can hear you better, but when Philip spoke, I lost different parts, so I couldn't get the question well.
Can you repeat your question, Philip, in a short way?
basically what I'm saying, the goods sold in the informal market, normally they are when they are confiscated by the police, and then they have been police have been confiscating these goods like big containers, and then the stock, loss of stocks, and then which it impact on workers because there are the owners of these factories. We all know always when they've lost their stock, they put pressure on workers, maybe by paying workers less or making workers work long hours, whatever. And then, so how are the workers in that regard protected?
Veasna, did you have a chance to hear the question? Right.
Yes, I'm trying. I'm trying to get it. Yes, and I'm even wondering, Philip, why the police confiscated those the products? Like, is it illegally sold there or what?
Well, from my side, I can't, okay, it's mostly okay because there has been a complaint from the trade unions and the workers that workers in South Africa are losing jobs because of the goods coming from China. Yet the same goods, when are sold in formal stores, they are not confiscated. But when they are sold on the street, they are confiscated.
Yeah,
and then they're all coming from the same factories, which means if they are confiscated, workers have to pay the.
I could not hear. Sorry.
Yeah, I think Veasna is having a bit of problems, but I think on the other hand, I think this is a kind of a different question from the topic of our workshop, because it has to do more with the approach of the police to informal workers. So they may be selling clothes, but they may be selling something else, and they would still be faced with the same kind of oppression just for being selling on the street as street vendors. So I think we are kind of a different territory. And perhaps, I think it's a very good question, and we may need to pick it up, but perhaps in another kind of a workshop. But Veasna, since we also have to wrap up because we are jumping in another workshop, if you can perhaps give us your last thoughts on this topic, and we could conclude.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think my. I mean, as I said, I think my last message that I think I have mentioned a little bit. I think we are at the beginning of it. I mean, at the beginning of it, it means we are trying to get brands to be involved, because the thing, historically, I mean, they have been trying to avoid this responsibility, and it seems now that it's the right time. At least they commit themselves, and I think that's why they come together as a ACT, for example. They come as a brand, and they make international commitment that they want to contribute to the improvement of the wages and working conditions on the ground. But as I said, like this is pretty new, that the brands get involved really deeply using their purchasing practices, which means using their order to have worker on the ground. So I mean, but how practical is that? Like, in what way we can do it? And I think this is the question for many of us here, like here and beyond. It's really it's to do a lot, like worker and have to be involved. The union organization have to be active. Also making use of of the strengths that they have, including, exactly what you say, the high unionization rate, have to like getting workers on board involved in the negotiation, and yes, and work out what would be the right ways at the workplace level, actually, like how can factory A, be able to have I think the best way would be CBA, like having a more long-term contract, and supplier are there, brand are involved, and then this is also a good way, because then supplier cannot make excuses, because very often employers say, okay, no, they are in the middle of the two sides, and then one brands does not increase the pay, so that then they cannot afford to pay higher wages and the demand from the workers, So I think, but it's a lot of opportunity. The due diligence law we talk about, which even another force, like a kind from the importing country, from the company side, to make it responsible to the challenges on the ground. We talk about even the increased informality of the workforce as well. This is also a challenge. But then so you see, these are the potential, the grouping of the brands, the new initiative, legal initiative, the law initiative in the producing countries, like the due diligence law at the country level, but also at the regional level as well, like the EU, which is now is in the process of developing this law, could give us a lot of potential, give us a lot of opportunity to. But then the trade union and trade union alliance have to act to make optimum use of this opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you so much, VS. I think, as you say, there are a lot of opportunities for trade unions in this regard, and also to include demands from the informal economy, as Philip mentioned, and the different aspects. So thank you everyone for your time. It was a pleasure to be with you. So we have just in a few minutes the next workshop. So you are welcome if you already signed for that.